Hello everybody, this is Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we're going to be studying paper 152, the events leading up to the Capernaum crisis, and that starts on page 1698, or paper 152 in the Urantia Book. So, guess we're about ready to get started. Did you want to join us? I can't see her either.
Yeah. Hi, y'all.
Hey, Bill. Nice to see you again.
We're going to have to hop in this one.
All right.
Hold your Sorry. Millie, are you out there? I don't see her on my screen. Do you have her on your screen?
No.
No?
No, I don't see Billy. I see Diane,
Ah, okay. Rodney and Stephen.
Keith, and Rodney on the next page.
Okay. Well, let's say a little prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight that we might come together and learn something from your revelation, this Urantia Book. Pray that you open our hearts and minds tonight that we might retain some of this information and share it with others. And our prayers go out tonight for those that are expecting the hurricane to come in the United States the next few days. Pray that you'll watch over and bless those you can and keep as many safe as possible. We thank you for your blessings, and we thank you in your Son's name, Jesus, my name, Nebadon. Amen. Okay, paper 152, events leading up to the Capernaum crisis. The story, oh, I guess I better change the slide up here so that people can follow along with us. The events leading up to the Capernaum crisis, the story of the cure of Amos, the Caressa lunatic, had already reached Bethsaida and Capernaum, so that a great crowd was waiting for Jesus when his boat landed that Tuesday forenoon. Among this throng were the new observers from the Jerusalem Sanhedrin, who had come down to Capernaum to find cause for the master's apprehension and conviction. As Jesus spoke with those who had assembled to greet him, Jairus, one of the rulers of the synagogue, made his way through the crowd, and falling down at his feet, took him by the hand and besought that he would hasten away with him, saying, Master, my little daughter and only child lies in my home at the point of death. I pray that you will come and heal her. And when Jesus heard the request of his father, he said, I will go with you. All right. This is the chief of the Sanhedrin. Oh, this is the map of the Jerusalem tour, and it's on our website also, and this is another of the same thing. Okay. Diane, would you like to take the next one?
As Jesus went along with Jairus, the large crowd which had heard the father's request followed on to see what would happen. Third time. Okay.
Yeah.
As Jesus went along with Jairus, the large crowd which had heard the father's request followed on to see what would happen. Shortly before they reached the ruler's house, as they hastened through a narrow street and as the throng jostled him, Jesus suddenly stopped, exclaiming, Someone touched me. And when those who were near him denied that they had touched him, Peter spoke up, Master, you can see that this crowd presses you, threatening to crush us, and yet you say someone has touched me. What do you mean? Then Jesus said, I asked who touched me, for I perceived that living energy had gone forth from me. As Jesus looked about him, his eyes fell upon a nearby woman, who coming forward knelt at his feet and said, For years I have been afflicted with a scourging hemorrhage. So I have to apologize for this. I have no idea what's wrong with it. I have suffered
No,
many.
you can't go up there.
I have suffered many things from many physicians. I have spent all my substance, but none could cure me. Then I heard a view, and I thought, if I may but touch the hem of his garment, I shall certainly be made whole. And so I pressed forward with the crowds that moved along until standing near you, Master, I touched the border of your garment, and I was made whole. I know that I have been healed of my affliction.
Okay, so this woman basically out of faith came up to Jesus thinking if she could just touch his garment, that she would be healed. And let's see what happens here. Oops. Let's get over. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I'm distracted. Stephen, would you take the next one?
Took her by the hand, and lifting her up, said, Daughter, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace. It was her faith, and not her touch, that made her whole. And this case is a good illustration of many apparently miraculous cures which attended upon Jesus' earth career, but which he in no sense consciously willed. The passing of time demonstrates that this woman was really cured of her malady. Her faith was a sort that laid direct hold upon the creative power resident in the Master's person. With the faith she had, it was only necessary to approach the Master's person. It was not at all necessary to touch his garment. That was merely the superstitious part of her belief. Jesus called this woman Veronica of Caesarea Philippi into the presence to correct two errors which might have lingered in her mind, or which might have persisted in the minds of those who witnessed the healing. He did not want Veronica to go away thinking that her fear in attempting to steal her cure had been honored, or that her superstition in associating the touch of his garment with her healing had been effective. He desired all to know that it was her pure and living faith that had wrought the cure.
So it was the lady's own faith that cured her, right? Because she was in the presence of the Master.
Roger,
Yeah.
in the
Oops.
in the section before that, he said he felt the living force leave him.
Yeah, that's the Creator Son force he was talking about. And only the Creator Son has that force of healing, right? That creative force. And that's what he was talking about. He felt it go away from her. And it was because her faith that that happened, Rodney. But he knew that something happened. He knew that healing had to take place because all healing has to go through him anyway, being the Creator's Son, right? Either him or the creative Mother Spirit, or together, mostly. And so he sensed that immediately when it happened. So that's what he was talking about, right? And that was part of his clarification to Veronica, because he didn't want her thinking that she stole the healing from him. It was her faith that made her whole. It wasn't. He didn't want her to think that it was right for her to go try to steal the healing from him. He wanted her to know that it was her faith that made her whole.
So that actually was an example to other people there, so not everyone have to go walk up and touch him.
Touch Jesus.
Because it's
That's
not
right.
possible to have everybody touching him.
That's right. Yeah. Did y'all catch that? Y'all hear what Diane said?
Yeah.
You want to say it again?
I was just saying that he probably stated that because otherwise everyone would start walking up and touching him for the healing, and he wanted to clarify that because that would not be a requirement for the healing. Otherwise, it would really, put a burden on Jesus to be touched constantly by everyone.
And remember, many times throughout these healing episodes, he says what? Your faith has made you whole,
Right.
right? So, that was the whole point. Okay, Rodney, would you take the next section, please? Take the next.
Day 1, Jairus' thoughts. Jairus was, of course, terribly impatient of this delay in reaching his home. They now hastened on, quickened pace. Even before they entered the ruler's yard, one of his servants came out, saying, "Told not the master, your daughter is dead." But Jesus seemed not to heed the servant's words, for taking with him Peter, James, and John, he turned and said to the grief-stricken father, "Fear not, only believe." When he entered the house, he found the flute makers
Players.
into the
Players, the flute players.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Flute players already there with the mourners, who were making an unseemly tumult. Already were the relatives engaged in making a meal. And when he had put all the mourners out of the room, he went in with the father and mother and his 3 apostles. He had told the mourners that the damsel was not dead, but they left her in scorn. Jesus now turned to the mother, saying, "Your daughter is not dead, she is only asleep." And when the house had quieted down, Jesus, going up to where the child lay, took her by the hand and said, "Daughter, I say to you, awaken and arise." And when the girl heard these words, she immediately rose up and walked across the room. And presently, after she had recovered from her daze, Jesus directed that they should give her something to eat, because she had been a long time without food.
Okay, so he literally healed her and then brought her back awake again and told him to give her some food, right? All right, let's see. Bill, would you take the next one, please?
Okay. Since there was much agitation in Capernaum against Jesus, he called the family together and explained that the maiden had been in a state of coma following along Peter. Excuse me. And that he had merely aroused her, that he had not raised her from the dead. He likewise explained all this to his apostles, but it was futile. They all believed he had raised the little girl from the dead. What Jesus said in explanation of many of these apparent miracles had little effect on his followers. They were miracle-minded and lost no opportunity to ascribe another wonder to Jesus. Jesus and the apostles returned to Bethsaida after he had specifically charged all of them that they should tell no man.
Of course, and what went around is people went around telling that he raised her from the dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
In reality, he just brought her out of her coma. When he came out of Jairus' house, 2 blind men led by a dumb boy followed him and cried out for healing. About this time, Jesus' reputation as a healer was at its very height. Everywhere he went, the sick and afflicted were waiting for him. The master now looked much worn, and all his friends were becoming concerned lest he continue his work of teaching and healing to the point of actual collapse. So he's wearing himself out, really.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Jesus' apostles, let alone the common people, could not understand the nature and attributes of the God-man. Neither has any subsequent generation been able to evaluate what took place on earth in the person of Jesus and Nazareth. And there can never occur an opportunity for either science or religion to check up on these remarkable events for the simple reason that such an extraordinary situation can never again occur, either on this world or on any other world in Nebadon. Never again on any world in this entire universe will a being appear in the likeness of mortal flesh, at the same time embodying all the attributes of creative energy, combined with spiritual endowments which transcend time and most other material limitations.
Did y'all catch that? Jesus was special. He was a creator son. So never again will another creator son come to this planet and do the same thing. Right? That's only happened once, and that's all that will ever happen throughout time. Because we will never have the creator son come to this planet, walk around like a human being, and have the creative energy of the universe at his beck and call. Right? That's why Jesus was able to heal people so readily, because he had the creative power of him and the creative mother spirit, right? That created the local universe. And of course, they being the ones that created the local universe, they also have all control over all material substance of this local universe, right? So that's why they're able to heal so readily, if they choose to.
There's another passage, another place in the book that says that at his beck and call were myriad, untold number of, to put it for lack of any other term at the present moment, angels.
Well, angels and material controllers. Yeah. He had all the angels, the mechanical physical controllers, the midwayers, all the celestial beings of the planet was at his beck and call anytime he wanted, right? So, and do you remember right after the resurrection, they were all hoping that they could help resurrect Christ. Remember that?
Yeah.
And they weren't allowed to, because he was a creator son. He submitted himself to death, and he rose himself from the dead. He's the only human being that ever was able to do that, and only human being that will ever be able to do that, right? Into the untold future, right? Nobody else can raise themselves from the dead. Only a creator son. And that's very important for us to understand. You could have all these beings that could help raise someone from the dead if they are ordered to do so, which they normally are not. But Jesus was the only being that ever lived on this planet that was capable of raising himself from the dead. Right? On his own power. Yeah.
It wasn't his body that he rose from the dead.
No, it wasn't. It was his Urantia self at that point, right?
Right.
Right.
But,
not his creator son self. That's important for you to understand, that the self that was raised from the dead was the Urantia version of Jesus of Nazareth. Right? All right. That's very important to understand.
Question.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody says that Jesus is supposed to come back.
Right.
And it says that in the Bible, it says that in the Urantia Book, that Jesus will come back.
He will return one day. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, in what form?
He will come back as his spiritual being, but not his Urantia self, but as his spiritual self, or creator son self. But we will be able to see him because the mechanical, physical controllers that control our eyes and everything of this universe will make an adjustment so that we'll be able to see him when he does. Okay? So, but he won't be a physical human being like we think of a human being. He will be his spiritual.
Another incarnation like Melchizedek,
No.
like he was.
No.
The human body of Mary and Joseph baby.
Yeah, right. No. Now, there is a caveat in all this, okay? When we get a material son or daughter come again, or a magisterial son, they may take on the likeness of mortal flesh. Okay? Also, any paradise son that would come down for an extended period of time, like a Trinity teacher son, they may take on a physical form. But that still means that they are who they are. They would be a magisterial son or a Trinity teacher son, but they may take on the form of a human being so that we can see and interact with them.
Right.
And they may not. They may come down as a Urantia form, and the material controllers, the mechanical, physical controllers, may make it possible for us to see them.
Well, why would Jesus incarnate in a spiritual sense and promise that he would be back, he would come back? And what would be his purpose in coming back just to this planet when there's so many other planets?
Because when we reach the age of light and life, they will bring down what's called the Urantia temple. That is the most likely time, in my mind, that Jesus would return in the celebration of the planet reaching light and life. Because they finally learned to follow his teachings. And that would be a perfect time for the Creator Son to come back in celebration of the completion of the goal of our entire planet.
But we won't be here.
We won't be here physically.
So
we'll be long gone.
The people that will experience that will be in a totally different
Mindset.
than we
Yeah.
are.
They will be.
Or that
Much higher
2000.
spiritual plane. Y'all have to remember, too, we're looking at this from an enlightened viewpoint. Why is that? Because we have the Urantia Book, right? And as we study this, we become more and more enlightened. We become closer and closer to our Urantia self. We come closer and closer to a spiritual self, right? So, our concept of the return of Michael or return of Jesus is different than the average person has. The average person thinks Jesus is going to appear in the clouds and all these dead bodies are going to come out of the ground and swoop up into the sky with him, right?
Okay, so that's the thinking behind. That's what they anticipate.
That's what they anticipate. That's why the Catholic Church doesn't want you to be cremated, right? They think your body's going to be resurrected and you're going to... actually, the Catholic creed is what? I believe in the resurrection of the body, right?
Not really.
Or a resurrection of the dead. Yeah. But they're going to be disappointed if they wait around for that to happen because it doesn't make sense. We don't need our physical bodies. We've got our Urantia bodies, our new bodies, and our new souls.
It'll be a whole different generation of people that we're appearing to, so
It will.
to anticipate him appearing in our lifetime is, there's no way that you could actually...
You can't know for sure, but I don't, they say always be mindful he could return at any time, multiple times. It's up to him, right? But it would make sense that he would return for sure on the celebration of the planet reaching light
There have to be
line.
some particular...
There would have to be some reason or event for him to do so, for him to make himself known to all mankind. Now, what's another thing that could happen that would cause that? The total adjudication of the Lucifer rebellion. Wouldn't you think that would be a good opportunity for Christ to appear to all mankind for reassurance that the Lucifer rebellion has been totally adjudicated and he has completely assumed the sovereignty of the local
Yeah,
universe?
that would be
That would be a joyous occasion. For that, you could look for Christ in the clouds, but don't look for the body being popped up from the ground, And don't expect people to be shot up through their cars driving down the street, like the rapture, right? You ever read Hal Lindsey's books, The Raptures, and all about the rapture and that sort of thing? I don't ever look for that to happen, because it's what? It's not necessary, right? The plan of God is we live on this planet, we die a normal death, just like Jesus did, and then was resurrected on the mansion worlds, right? Even when there's an earthly adjudication, this is where all this stuff comes from. When Christ tried to teach the apostles about the the millennial adjudication of a planet. Every 1,000 years or so, the sleeping survivors are taken up in mass, right? We know about that, right? But they're not taken out of their cars as live human beings. They're not pulled up from the ground, and that's what we all imagine. They're not about these movies where people are driving around and suddenly their best friend's missing because they've been in the rapture, right? That's wishful thinking. That's what I call the Baptist viewpoint, being former Baptist. You know, it's a nice fairy story, but when we become enlightened, like we have in this book, we have to go above these things that were not true or fairy stories to make us feel good, right? We have to become what? Spiritual, cosmic citizens. And to do that, you have to accept the truth. That's why they call this the truth book, right? And at the very beginning of the book, the foreword of the book, if you look at the very end of the foreword, it basically states that this is to enlighten us, you know, to make our life better, to bring us above these things which are not true, and to learn the truth. And that's our responsibility, to learn the truth, right? And all the rest of it is fun to think about, but it's not truth. You know, that's what it boils down to. And I know I just stepped on a bunch of people's toes because all these people want to believe that Christ is coming back and He's going to take everybody up, but that does not happen. The sleeping survivors are already dead and they're taking up, and you don't know the dates they're taking up. There's no big to-do about it. It happens every 1,000 years or so, or every couple thousand years. Okay? And those are those who do not make it to the third level or the third psychic circle. They wait for the planetary resurrection or adjudication. That happens about every 1,000 years. And then they're taken to the mansion world in mass, right? And they wake up in mass. Right? So, but we don't want to do that, do we? We want to wake up on the third day. We want to scoot on up there. Get on with it, right? That's why we study things like this book, to learn how to be that way, right? Okay, let's go on. Now I've lost track of who's supposed to read.
I agree with that first part there very much, that, you know, this planet is here to be enlightened, and it's going to take the generations to do that. And once we reach that level, then that's when He'll return. I think that's the best explanation.
Yeah, I do too. I think that'll be the perfect time for the return of Christ, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Roger, I've got a question.
Yeah.
So is Jesus returning or Michael?
Very good question. In my personal opinion, Rodney, it could be either or both. And let me tell you why. The experience of Jesus of Nazareth, which is Michael's incarnation, right? The new Jesus of Nazareth, or the what would you call the new soul created by Jesus of Nazareth, has all the same memory patterns. As far as we're concerned, he is Jesus, right? But at the same time, Michael of Nebadon is that same Jesus, right? It would be like trying to tell you the difference between you and your thought adjuster once you've fused, okay? Because you've become such one and the same person, it wouldn't matter which one came back. It really wouldn't. Because the memories of Jesus are in the Jesus created by the living soul of Jesus, and the memories of Michael are the same exact memories, right?
Right. Well, actually, Jesus of Nazareth is the incarnation of Michael of Salmon.
That's exactly right.
The same person. Just he left there and came here and to be born as a baby.
Now, the thing that's hard for us to understand is because of the unusual circumstances of this incarnation, there's created a new Jesus, right? There's a separate Jesus than that Jesus which is Michael of Nebadon.
Mm-hmm.
And that separate Jesus is basically going to be in charge of everything that we know of in the local universe, right? He will he will be head of the 24 counselors. He will be head of the adjudication of the local universe. He will be head of everything. And yet there's still a separate being which has that same knowledge and we love just as much, which is the separate Michael of Nebadon, and which never ceases, right? Of course, Jesus never ceases, but those two together have separate pathways from this time on, after the resurrection. Okay? And that's hard for us to wrap our head around. It really is.
There's a passage in the Bible that says that Jesus will sit at the right hand of God and until his enemies are made a footstool.
Uh-huh.
Now, does that mean that passage, the enemy be made a footstool, refer to the adjudication process of the Lucifer rebellion?
That's very likely.
That's very likely, Bill. It is. Because when the adjudication may take 2 million more years, we don't know, you know. But when it's done, and then those who participated are either repent or they're annihilated. And so they would become those of what? The footstool, right? So,
Right.
yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Stephen, I think you're up next.
Okay. Never before Jesus was on earth, nor since has it been possible so directly, graphically, to secure the result dependent upon the strong and living faith of mortal men and women. To repeat these phenomena, we would have to go into the immediate presence of Michael, the Creator, and find him as he was in those days, the Son of Man. Likewise, today, while his absence prevents such material manifestation, we should refrain from placing any sort of limitation on the possible exhibition of his spiritual power. That's an interesting statement there. Although the Master is absent as a material being, he is present as a spiritual influence in the hearts of men. By going away from the world, Jesus made it possible for his spirit to live alongside that of his Father, which indwells the minds of all mankind.
Did y'all catch that?
Can you repeat that?
All right. The spiritual power they're talking about is the circuit of the Son of God. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody still with me? That's the Son's spiritual circuit. Okay? The pouring out on the Spirit of truth made it possible for Jesus to indwell along with the Father every human mind on this planet and every mind on every other planet of his local universe. Okay? So the Michael of Nebadon we think of dwells within us, just like the Father does through the estate adjuster. But the eternal Son of God also dwells within us in that same Spirit of truth circuit. Okay? That's what connects us to all together and to Michael of Nebadon. That does not limit the spiritual power of Jesus of Nazareth that's been resurrected, does it? As a what? A separate entity or separate being. That doesn't take anything away from Michael of Nebadon at all. It adds to his possibilities of being in more than one place or being in more than one manifestation at a time. And only a Creator Son of God can experience that manifestation. Okay? We can't really understand it. We only know that it's the case because of the Urantia Book. Okay? So we've been enlightened about it, but we can't really understand it to any great extent. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But it says here that he lives alongside us with the Father in the minds of man. Right? So, I've been preaching tonight, haven't
I think you've been having insight.
I? Yeah. Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one?
2, feeding the 5,000. Jesus continued to teach the people day by day while he instructed the apostles and evangelists at night. On Friday, he declared the furlough 1 week that all his followers might go home or to their friends for a few days before preparing to go up to Jerusalem for the Passover. But more than 1/2 of his disciples refused to leave him, and the multitude was daily increasing in size, so much so that David Zebedee desired to establish a new county. But Jesus refused to consent. The master had so little rest over the Sabbath that on Sunday morning, March 27, he sought to get away from the people. Some of the evangelists were left to talk to the multitude while Jesus and the 12 planned to escape unnoticed to the opposite shore of the lake, where they proposed to obtain much needed rest in a beautiful park south of the state of Julius. This region was a favorite resorting place for Capernaum folks. They were all familiar with these parks on the eastern shore.
So everyone pretty much knew about this and pretty much knew about where they were going. But they weren't supposed to know they were going there, right? All right. Bill, would you take the next one?
Okay. But the people would not have it so. They saw the direction taken by Jesus' boat, and hiring every craft available, they started out in pursuit. Those who could not obtain boats fared forth on foot to walk around the upper end of the lake.
So if they couldn't get across on a boat, they walked around the lake to get there the long way. By late afternoon, more than 1,000 persons had located the master in one of the parks, and he spoke to them briefly. Being followed by Peter, many of these people had brought food with them, and after eating the evening meal, they gathered about in small groups while Jesus and the apostles and the disciples taught them.
Monday afternoon, the multitude had increased to more than 3,000, and still, way into the evening, the people continued to flock in, bringing all manner of sick folks with them. Hundreds of interested persons had made their plans to stop over at Capernaum to see and hear Jesus on their way to the Passover, and they simply refused to be disappointed. By Wednesday noon, about 5,000 men, women, and children were assembled here in this park to the south of the state of Julius. The weather was pleasant, it being near the end of the rainy season in this locality.
Talking about the locality, Diane was watching this video. This work is called, it's on Vimeo. It's just vimeo.com/Urantia/. And there's about 8 to 10 videos on that location. But one of the videos on that location is about an hour and 17 minutes. And it tells an interesting story from the Urantia Book about Jesus, but it shows slides and video of the locations where these things happen. And it was so beautiful, wasn't it, Diane? So I recommend y'all go out and see that. It's worthwhile. Stephen, would you take the next one?
Okay. Philip had provided
a 3-day supply of food for Jesus and the 12, which was in the custody of the marked lad, their boy above chores. By afternoon of this, the third day, for almost half of this multitude, the food the people had brought with them was nearly exhausted. David Zebedee had no tenant city here to feed and accommodate crowds. Neither had Philip made food provisions for such a multitude. But the people, even though they were hungry, would not go away. It was being quietly whispered about that Jesus, desiring to avoid trouble with both Herod and the Jerusalem leaders, had chosen this quiet spot outside the jurisdiction of all his enemies as the proper place to be crowned king. The enthusiasm of the people was rising every hour. Not a word was said to Jesus, though, of course, he knew all that was going on. Even the 12 apostles were still tainted with such notions, and especially the youngest evangelist. The apostles who favored this attempt to proclaim Jesus king were Peter, John, Simon, Zelotes, and Judas Iscariot. Those opposing the plan were Andrew, James, Nathaniel, and Thomas, Matthew, Philip, and the Alphaeus twins were non-committal. Okay, now these names. Okay, the ringleader of this plot to make him king was Joe, one of the young evangelists.
Okay, before we get too far in this, I want to mention the Mark lad. Y'all remember hearing about this Mark lad running around with him?
Mm-hmm.
This is the same Mark that the Gospels came from. He relayed these stories to Isidore, okay, who was basically a scribe. And all of our 4 Gospels came from this information, originally started from Mark. Okay, so just so you knew who this Mark lad that ran around with him was. Okay, so he ended up being very useful in creating the Gospels in the New Testament. Okay, so basically the plot was this. The group of the young evangelists, a group of them, wanted to declare Jesus king. Right? They wanted a king, an earthly king to follow after. And Jesus had told them many times before that was not what he was here for. Right? All right. So let's go on, Rodney.
What was that website?
Oh, it's https:// Vimeo. Vimeo. Vimeo.com/Urantia/.
Part of the Urantia films, it's under Urantia.
Yeah, it says Urantia Films on it, and there's several interesting films there. But one of them is like an hour and 17 minutes. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's actual pictures of where Jesus and his group ended up at different locations where they had.
All the stories in the Urantia book, they show pictures of the area where they're talking about, where he went around and different things happened. So it gives you a mindset of what it really looked like.
A picture.
Yeah.
Picture in your mind.
Yeah.
That's cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this was a stage setting about 5 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, when Jesus passed James Alphaeus to summon Andrew and Philip. Said Jesus, "What shall we do with the multitude? They have been with us now 3 days, and many of them are hungry. They have no food." Philip and Andrew exchanged glances, and then Philip answered, "Master, you should send these people away so that they may go to the villages around about and buy themselves food." And Andrew, fearing the materialization of the kingdom plot, quickly joined with Philip, saying, "Yes, Master, I think it best that you dismiss the multitude so they may go away and buy food while you secure a rest for a season." By this time, others of the 12 had joined the conference. Then said Jesus, but I do not desire to send them away hungry. Can you not feed them?" This was too much for Philip, and he spoke right up. "Master, in this country place, where can we buy bread for this multitude? 200 denarii worth would not be enough for lunch."
So Philip didn't know where they could even come up with the money, much less somewhere they could buy that much food for folks, right? Because there was about 5,000 of them. All right. Bill.
Okay? Before the apostles had an opportunity to express themselves, Jesus turned to Andrew and Philip, saying, "I do not want to send these people away. Here they are like sheep without a shepherd. I would like to feed them. What food have we with us?" While Philip was conversing with Matthew and Judas, Andrew sought out the Mark lad to ascertain how much was left of their store of provision. He returned to Jesus, saying, "The lad had left only 5 barley loaves and 2 dried fishes." And Peter promptly added, "We have yet to eat this evening."
So they haven't even had anything to eat this evening, right? All right. Which is the normal human reaction, right? We haven't even eaten. Now we're going to feed them, right? All right. For a moment, Jesus stood in silence. There was a faraway look in his eyes. The apostles said nothing. Jesus turned suddenly to Andrew and said, "Bring me the loaves and fishes." And when Andrew had brought the basket to Jesus, the master said, "Direct the people to sit down on the grass in companies of 100, and appoint a leader over each group, while you bring all of the evangelists here with us." All right. And this is just a picture of feeding the 5,000. All right.
Jesus took up the loaves in his hands, and after he had given thanks, he broke the bread and gave it to his apostles. He passed it on to their associates, who in turn carried it to the multitude. Jesus in like manner broke and distributed the fishes. And this multitude did eat and were filled. And when they had finished eating, Jesus said to the disciples, "Gather up the broken pieces that remain over, so that nothing will be lost." And when they had finished gathering up the fragments, they had 12 basketfuls. They who ate of this extraordinary feast numbered about 5,000 men, women, and children.
So they started with very little and multiplied enough to feed 5,000, right? Now that's a miracle. Yeah. Stephen.
And this is the first and only major miracle which Jesus performed as a result of his conscious pre-plan. It is true that his disciples were disposed to call many things miracles, which were not. But this was a genuine supernatural ministration in this case, so we were taught. Michael multiplied food elements as he always does, except for the elimination of the time factor and the visible light channel.
Now, that last sentence, okay? Michael multiplied food elements as he always does. You see that? Except for the elimination of the time factor and visible light channels.
Well, what does that mean?
I'm going to explain it to you right now, okay? I'm going to enlighten you tonight with something that you will take with you forever, right? Who do you think is in charge of all the growing food on this planet? Everything that grows. Corn, wheat, barley, tomatoes, potatoes, tomatoes.
The farmers.
I was going to say.
No? Michael. Michael and the creative mother spirit. Now read that sentence again. Michael multiplied food elements as he always does. So it's because of the creative mother spirit and his relationship with the creative mother spirit, Michael controls the physical universe. So he multiplied food elements just like He does for us every day of the week. As it grows, it's the creative Mother Spirit and His forces and the forces of Michael that causes these things to grow. It makes sense?
It is a miracle when you think about it.
It's a miracle in itself.
Different seeds, you know.
Yeah, you take a seed and you put it in the ground and it grows. Who do you think controls that? Right? Okay?
Source material.
So now if we go back to this paragraph again, it says, in this case, so we are taught, right? They're talking about the midwayers, they're taught this. Michael multiplied food elements as he always does, except for the elimination of the time factor and the visible life channel. What would be the time factor?
Well, the time factor would be the fact that he could, you know, that it was a continuous thing.
Yeah, the time factor is the amount of time it takes to grow the food.
And the visible life channel would be the fact that the fish would come out of the water.
The fish would come out of the water. The wheat would come out of the ground. It would take time for the wheat to grow, and then you've got to prepare the wheat into loaves, and you've got to bake the loaves. So he does the same things as he always does, but you don't see the visible channel of this happening, right? That's the miracle.
It is.
You know? So if you think about it, this miracle happens to us ongoing every single day of our lives. So when that fish is growing out in the ocean, and the fisherman catches it and brings it in, and we fillet it and have tilapia with lemon sauce on it, who do you think caused that? Michael and the creative Mother Spirit. Make sense?
Who's creating all the plastic that's going in the ocean and
We're doing that.
Well, there's another side to look at on that, and that would be from our lack of faith and our lack of understanding and our desire to work with our hands and our belief in what we do in our physical life, that we are actually causing the shortages because we feel that, you know, our hands have to create this because God doesn't.
Right.
that's good.
Yeah. That's another way to look at it,
Yeah,
Steve.
that is.
You're right. I just wanted to point that out. So the miracle is a miracle, right? But we have miracles around us every day, right? Those same miracles. Thank God for that. Right? Okay. Rodney, I think you're up.
We don't really know.
I'm not sure. I think you're up.
Hey, time to squint my eyes.
That's tiny.
3, the king-making episode. The feeding of the 5,000 by supernatural energy was another of those cases where human pity plus creative power equal that which happened. Now that the multitude had been fed to the full, and since Jesus' fame was then and there augmented by this stupendous wonder, the project to seize the master and proclaim him king required no further personal direction. The idea seemed to spread through the crowd like a contagion. The reaction of the multitude to this sudden spectacular supply of their physical needs was profound and overwhelming. For a long time, the Jews had been taught that the Messiah, the son of David, when he should come, would cause the land again to flow with milk and honey, and that the bread of life would be bestowed upon them as manna from heaven, was supposed to have fallen upon their forefathers in the wilderness. And was not all of this expectation now fulfilled right before their eyes? For this hungry, undernourished multitude had finished gorging itself with the wonder food, there was but one unanimous reaction. Here is our King. The wonder-working deliverer of Israel had come. In the eyes of these simple-minded people, the power to feed carried with it the right to rule. No wonder, then, that the multitude, when it had finished feasting, rose as one man and shouted, "Make him king!"
Not any wonder at all, is there?
Mhm.
No. All right. Bill, would you take the next one, please?
Okay. This mighty shout enthused Peter and those of the apostles who still retained the hope of seeing Jesus assert his right to rule. But these false hopes were not to live for long. This mighty shout of the multitude had hardly ceased to reverberate from the nearside rocks when Jesus stepped out upon a huge stone and, lifting up his right hand to command their attention, said, "My children, you mean well, but you are short-sighted and material-minded." There was a brief pause. The stalwart Galilean was there majestically posed in the enchanting glow of that eastern twilight. Every inch he looked like a king as he continued to speak to his breathless multitude. "You would make me king, not because your soul have been lighted with a great truth, but because your stomachs have been filled with bread. How many times have I told you that my kingdom is not of this world? This kingdom of heaven, which we are proclaimed, is a spiritual brotherhood, and no man rules over it seated upon a material throne. My Father in heaven is the all-wise and the all-powerful ruler over the spiritual brotherhood of the sons of God on earth. Have I so failed in revealing to you the Father of spirits, that you would make a king of his Son in the flesh? Now all of you, go hence to your own home. If you must have a king, let the Father of lights be enthroned in the heart of each of you, as the Spirit's ruler of all families."
So the kingdom of heaven frees us all, right? We have no material king. We have no material rulers, right? The people that govern us are only governors to us as long as we make them so or allow them so to be, right? So, when you say you're spiritually free, you have no man that you have to answer to. No one. Because the spiritual kingdom of God frees you throughout the entire cosmos, because the only ruler is whom? Father God. God the Father. And that's from his direct representation, his Son. Right?
Well, that's his first command, is to love your God, your Father, with all of your heart and mind and soul and spirit.
That's right. And then love each other as yourself. Right?
Right?
Right. All right. These words of Jesus sent the multitude away stoned in his heart. Stunned, I'm sorry. Stunned in his heart. They're probably stoned too from all the bread and fish. Right? Many who had believed in him turned back and followed him no more from that day. The apostles were speechless. They stood in silence, gathered about the 12 baskets of fragments of food. Only the chore boy, the Mark lad, spoke, and he refused to be our king. Jesus, before going off to be alone in the hills, turned to Andrew and said, "Take your brethren back to Zebedee's house and pray with them, especially for your brother Simon Peter. because he was their leader, right? And he was disheartened the most. Okay? All right. Here.
For Simon Peter's night vision, the apostles, without their master, sent off by themselves, entered the boat and in silence began to row toward Bethsaida on the western shore of the lake. None of the 12 were so crushed and downcast as Simon Peter. Hardly a word was spoken. They were all thinking of the master alone in the hills. Had he forsaken them? He had never before sent them all away and refused to go with them. What could all this mean?
So they were all confused, right?
Yeah.
Stephen, would you take the next one, please?
Okay. Darkness descended upon them, for there had arisen a strong and contrary wind, which made progress almost impossible. As the hours of darkness and hard rowing passed, Peter grew weary and fell into a deep sleep of exhaustion. Andrew and James put him to rest on the cushioned seat in the stern of the boat. While the other apostles toiled against the wind and the waves, Peter dreamed a dream. He saw a vision of Jesus coming to them walking on the sea. When the master seemed to walk on by the boat, Peter cried out, "Save us, Master, save us." And those who were in the rear of the boat heard him say some of these words. As this
Apparition
of the night season continued in Peter's mind, he dreamed that he heard Jesus say, "Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid." This was like the balm of Gilead to Peter's disturbed soul. It soothed his troubled spirit so that, in his dream, he cried out to the Master, "Lord, if it really is you, bid me come and walk with you on the water." And when Peter started to walk upon the water, the boisterous waves frightened him. And as he was about to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And many of the 12 heard him utter this cry. Then Peter dreamed that Jesus came to rescue, and stretching forth his hand, took hold and lifted him up, saying, "Oh, you of little faith, wherefore did you doubt?"
And this dream is where the story came about of Jesus walking on the water, right? All right. The story of the dream got turned into the story of Jesus walking on the water, right? Do you think Jesus would have broke his own universal rules to walk across the water?
No.
No, I don't think so.
No, but Peter needed comfort in his dream.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Rodney, you're up.
In connection with the latter part of his dream, Peter arose from the seat whereon he slept and actually stepped overboard into the water. And he awakened from his dream as Andrew, James, and John reached out and pulled him out of the sea.
That's why they don't want you to learn, they don't want you to sleepwalk in the Navy, right? Not a good idea. It's a bad thing. How do I know this? Because I got sent to the psychiatrist when I was in the Navy because I walked down the barracks one night sound asleep. You start sleepwalking, they don't like it. They get real upset real fast. So I had to go see the psychiatrist for about 3 times.
Isn't that from absolute exhaustion, though?
It was. All right. Bill, would you take the next one?
Okay. To Peter, this experience was always real. He sincerely believed that Jesus came to them that night. He only partially convinced John Mark, which explains why Mark left a portion of the story out of his narrative. Luke, the physician who made careful search into these matters, concluded that the episode was a vision of Peter's and therefore refused to give place to this story in the preparation of his narrative.
That's why you can't find it in Luke's gospel, right? That's why it's not in Luke's gospel, right?
But, I relate that to, you talking about people believing that they're talking to somebody who has died.
Right.
They're in a kind of a state and they're really, down and upset and whatnot. And it could be a dream that they had. And I was talking to a girl recently and she swears she talked to 4 people that had died.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you can't talk to the people that have died. I said, perhaps you saw an angel,
Uh-huh.
That in 116 that, the angels minister to us. And then she was kind of, oh, no, but then she said, well, can they appear as they look? And I said, well, sure, angels can do all this. So after a while, she was, well, maybe it could have been. And maybe in another year or two, she'll accept that it was a dream. But, it's just, we got to understand, people did see something.
They did see something.
And they related to, talking to that dead person.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Guess I'm up again. 5. Back in Bethsaida. Thursday morning before daylight, they anchored the boat offshore near Zebedee's house and sought sleep until about noontime. Andrew was first up and going for a walk by the sea found Jesus in company with their chore boy sitting on a stone on the water's edge. Who's their chore boy? Mark, right? Notwithstanding that many of the multitude and the young evangelists searched all night and much of the next day about the eastern hills for Jesus, shortly after midnight, he and the Mark lad had started to walk around the lake and across the river back to Bethsaida. Well, I tell you what, Mark had such a wonderful experience with Jesus being there.
Of the 5,000 who were miraculously fed, and who, when their stomachs were full and their hearts empty, would have made him king, only about 500 persisted in following after him. And before these received word that he was back in Bethsaida, Jesus asked Andrew to assemble the 12 apostles and their associates, including the women, saying, I desire to speak with them. And when all were ready, Jesus said,
Stephen.
How long shall I bear with you? Are you all slow of spiritual comprehension and deficient in living faith? All these months have I taught you the truths of the kingdom, and yet are you dominated by material motives instead of spiritual considerations? Have you not ever read in the scripture when Moses exhorted the unbelieving children of Israel, saying, Fear not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord? Said the singer, Put your trust in the Lord. Be patient, wait upon the Lord, and be of good courage. He shall strengthen your heart. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he shall sustain you. Trust him in all the times, and pour out your heart to him. For God is your refuge. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. It is better to trust the Lord than to put confidence in human princes.
So he was quoting the scriptures that they were supposed to know to bring them to their spiritual awareness, right? But they still wanted to go back to the material existence on everything, right?
Well, in some of the part here, he talked about taking some apostles and pondering the problems of the Father's kingdom. And that's the Father's kingdom that we're hoping is going to be originating here on earth.
Yeah.
As we look at the Father's kingdom, it has a lot of problems today as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of these problems are based on the fact that people are still looking for miracles and wonders and healings and all of these other things rather than spiritual teachings.
That's right, Stephen. You're absolutely right. And it's because we're so material-minded, aren't we?
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to.
And scriptures are very, when you go through and you do some discernment, you can see that the spiritual aspect is there. Bill quotes the scriptures a lot, and it's usually the higher spiritual aspects that he quotes rather than the church saying, pray for this and you'll get money or whatever, a lot more materialistic as
Well,
what
it's,
their approach is.
it's a big difference when you read the old scriptures, both the Old and the New Testament, with an enlightened mind. Because when you read those scriptures with the enlightened mind, which you're supposed to grow from the Urantia Book, they mean something totally different, don't they?
I like the way Bill translates it.
Yeah.
He always brings it together.
That's right.
You want to have a deeper understanding of the Bible's, sayings and relationship to the Urantia Book.
Yeah.
I mean,
It does.
it correlates perfectly.
Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
And now do you all see that the working of miracles and the performance of material wonders do not win souls for the spiritual kingdom? We fed the multitude, but it did not lead them to hunger for the bread of life, neither to thirst for the waters of spiritual righteousness. When their hunger was satisfied, they sought not entrance into the kingdom of heaven, but rather sought to proclaim the Son of Man king after the manner of the kings of this world, only that they might continue to eat bread without having to toil therefor. And all this, in which many of you did more or less participate, does nothing to reveal the Heavenly Father or to advance His kingdom on earth. Have we not sufficient enemies among the religious leaders of the land without doing that which is likely to estrange also the civil rulers? I pray that the Father will anoint your eyes, that you may see, and open your ears, that you may hear, to the end that you may have full faith in the gospel which I have taught you.
What is he talking about? He's talking about spiritual insight, right? That's what he's talking about. He wants these people to have spiritual insight so they can discern the spiritual life, not just the material life, right? Bill, would you take the next one?
Okay. Jesus then announced that he wished to withdraw for a few days of rest with his apostles before they made ready to go up to Jerusalem for Passover. And he forbade any of the disciples or the multitude to follow him. Accordingly, they went by boat to the region of Gennesaret for 2 or 3 days of rest and sleep. Jesus was preparing for a great crisis of his life on earth, and he therefore spent much time in communion with the Father in heaven.
We know what that crisis is, right?
Mm-hmm.
The news of the feeding of the 5,000, the attempt to make Jesus king, aroused widespread curiosity and stirred up the fears of both the religious leaders and the civil rulers throughout all Galilee and Judea. While this great miracle did nothing to further the gospel of the kingdom in the souls of the material-minded and half-hearted believers, it did serve the purpose of bringing to a head the miracle-seeking and king-craving proclivities of Jesus' immediate family of apostles and close disciples. This particular episode brought an end to an early era of teaching, training, and healing, thereby preparing the way for the inauguration of this last year of proclaiming the higher and more spiritual phases of the new gospel of the kingdom, divine sonship, spiritual liberty, and eternal salvation. Here,
6.
Gennesaret.
While resting in the home of a wealthy believer in the Gennesaret region, Jesus held informal conferences with the 12 every afternoon. The ambassadors of the kingdom were a serious, sober, and chastened group of disillusioned men. But even after all that had happened, and as subsequent events disclosed, these 12 men were not yet fully delivered from their inbred and long-cherished notions about the coming of the Jewish Messiah. Events of the preceding few weeks had moved in too swiftly for these astonished fishermen to grasp their full significance. It required time for men and women to effect radical and extensive changes in their basic and fundamental concept of social conduct, philosophic attitudes, and religious convictions.
Takes digestion time, right?
It takes time.
This is on the Sea of Tiberium at Gennesaret. No, here, I want to see it too, right? Steve.
Okay, well, that last part is also telling us that, you know, realistically, since we were children, we have been told a lot of lies. Okay?
We have.
Seriously.
Really, yeah. And we might think because we read this that those lies are still not affecting us. That's not the case. You know, it's those lies that are blocking us from really enjoying that true kingdom on earth that he came to establish.
Yeah.
And
It's hard to unlearn something you've learned your whole life, isn't it?
It's hard to
that's it. And that's why he left us the out of just recognize who I am and believe it and desire it with all your heart, mind, and soul.
Yeah.
And then you can be secure in that. And as the generations pass, we'll get to the other level.
That's right. Yeah.
Well spoken.
Well, go ahead.
Well spoken.
Okay. While Jesus and the 12 were resting at Gennesaret,
Gennesaret. Yeah.
okay, the multitudes dispersed, some going to their homes, others going on up to Jerusalem for the Passover. In less than 1 month's time, the enthusiastic and open followers of Jesus, who numbered more than 50,000 in Galilee alone, shrank to less than 500. Jesus desired to give his apostles such an experience with the fickleness of popular acclaim that they would not be tempted to rely on such manifestations of transient religious hysteria after he should leave them alone in the work of the kingdom. But he was only partially successful in this effort.
And we've seen this mass hysteria even in our lifetime, right? Many religious groups over time. Right?
Oh,
Yeah. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
The second night of their sojourn at Gennesaret, the Master again told the apostles the parable of the sower, and added these words: "You see, my children, the appeal to human feelings is transitory and utterly disappointing. The exclusive appeal to the intellect of man is likewise empty and barren. It is only by making your appeal to the spirit which lives within the human mind that you can hope to achieve lasting success and accomplish those marvelous transformations of human character that are presently shown in the abundant yielding of the genuine fruits of the Spirit in the daily lives of all who are thus delivered from the darkness of doubt by the birth of the Spirit into the light of faith, the kingdom of heaven."
I'm going to do that one on its own. I think you said it well enough. Bill, would you take the next one, please?
Jesus taught the appeal to the emotions as the technique of arresting and focusing the intellectual attention. He designated the mind, thus aroused and quickened, as the gateway to the soul, where there resides that spiritual nature of man, which must recognize truth and respond to the spiritual appeal of the gospel in order to afford the permanent result of true character transformation.
And this is how, when you talk to your friends and relatives, You make them interested in spiritual things, right? It's an art. And it's very hard to learn this. It takes many years of practice. And by appealing to this gateway of the mind arousing the soul, that you can enter spiritual concepts, and regardless of what someone's beliefs are, they will listen to that little drop of truth you're trying to reveal to them, right? And it's hard to be patient to do this. We want to tell everybody everything right away, right? All right. Jesus thus endeavored to prepare the apostles for the impending shock, the crisis of the public attitude toward him, which was only a few days' distance. He explained to the 12 that the religious rulers of Jerusalem would conspire with Herod Antipas to effect their destruction. The 12 began to realize more fully, though not finally, that Jesus was not going to sit on David's throne. They saw more fully that spiritual truth was not to be advanced by material wonders. They began to realize that the feeding of the 5,000 and the popular movement to make Jesus king was the apex of the miracle-seeking, wonder-working expectance of the people and the height of Jesus' acclaim by the populace. They vaguely discerned and dimly foresaw the approaching times of spiritual sifting and cruel adversity. These 12 men were slowly awakening to the realization of the real nature of their task as ambassadors to the kingdom, and they began to gird themselves for the trying and testing ordeals of the last year of the Master's ministry on earth. And on this paragraph, I want to bring something to y'all that is not part of this paper, but I want you to understand that when you bring truth to people, and you try to bring truth to yourself, and the example I'm going to use is myself. When I first started reading this book, I started at the life of Christ, and everything I read, I tried to make Christ's story fit into my current belief system, right? I didn't read the book the first time through seeking truth. I read the book trying to justify my own concepts of my own religion's teachings, right? And those that didn't agree with me, I disagreed with the book, right? Because that's the way we think, right? It's hard for us to see the spiritual aspect of what's being taught, not our material desires to make it fit into our own belief. So every miracle I read about in the Urantia Book, I was just like these people. I wanted the miracle, I wanted Jesus to get credit for it. I wanted him to sit on the throne too, But that's the way we're taught. And we try to fit our concepts into the book, right? Instead of just sitting back and letting the book teach us the spiritual concepts and adapt the new concepts. And Jesus had the same problem teaching his followers, right? They wanted everything to fit in their preconceived ideas of the way it should be. Not just accept the teaching he gave them as the full truth. You see what I'm saying? And that's hard to do. We all do the same thing. And it's hard for us when we bring people to the book that they do not do the same thing also. Right?
Roger,
Yeah.
obviously Jesus knew what the outcome of feeding 5,000 people would be.
Yes.
He had foresight, and what was accomplished?
What was accomplished was it brought both the evangelists and the apostles to the point that they give up their material wants and needs for him to be a king, and their material wants and needs for him to sit on the throne of David, right? And what he tried to do is bring them to the point where they would give all that up for the actual kingdom of God and replace all that with
He
the
more or less did that for his immediate followers.
That's right. That's right. And it's hard for us to accept that, isn't it? You know, because we want Jesus to be the most popular being on earth, you know, even back then. But these are not the ones that are looking for spiritual food. They're looking to be taken care of, right?
Because most of them were there for physical healing.
That's right. Physical healing, food, assurance, make them feel better, that sort of thing. Not spiritual growth, right?
So it was a great example to show the apostles of what he was talking about.
And what was to come for them, Rodney, after he died, right? Because their testing just started when he died. They kind of coasted along during the life of Christ, teaching and that sort of thing and learning. But when he died, they had to go out on their own faith, not just their faith, but the Spirit of truth faith and trusting their thought adjuster. And during that period of time, it's a hard thing to do. You know, I give it to him. I even give it to Paul the Apostle. I disagreed with so many things that Paul did, but that man stuck to his guns. You have to give him. You have to give him that. You know, he was faithful to his beliefs, right?
I believe he was free, so he was above the bindings of this earth. So
Yeah.
there was nothing to do to him in a physical sense that he was concerned with.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the tough thing to learn. All right, who's next? You? Okay.
Before they left
Yes, sir. Vanessa.
Gennesaret, Jesus instructed them regarding the miraculous feeding of the 5,000, telling them just why he engaged in this extraordinary manifestation of creative power, and also assuring them that he did not thus yield to his sympathy for the multitude until he had ascertained that it was according to the Father's will.
So he waited until he felt it was the Father's will before he did anything. Right?
There's a huge lesson there. That's good.
Huge lesson. That's right. Stephen, would you take the next one?
Okay, at Jerusalem, Sunday, April 3rd, Jesus, accompanied only by the 12 apostles, started from
Bethsaida. That's right.
Bethsaida, okay, on the journey to Jerusalem, to avoid the multitudes and to attract as little attention as possible. They journeyed by way of Gesera and Philadelphia. He forbade them to do any public teaching on this trip. Neither did he permit them to teach or preach while sojourning in Jerusalem. They arrived at Bethany near Jerusalem late on Wednesday evening, April 6th. For this one night they stopped at the home of Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. But the next day they separated. Jesus, with John, stayed at the home of a believer named Simon, near the house of Lazarus in Bethany. Judas Iscariot and Simon Zealous stopped with friends in Jerusalem, while the rest of the apostles sorted them two and two in different homes.
Let's see. Rodney, would you take the next one?
You pronounce that Zelotes?
Simon Zelotes. He was part of the Zealots group, right? And they called the Zealots, his last name was Zelotes. So it was Simon Zelotes. And he was actually part of the group called the Zealots. And the Zealots were the ones that wanted to overthrow the government of the Romans. So they're the ones that got killed, what was it, 50 of them on a mound by the Romans. So.
Jesus entered Jerusalem only once during this Passover, and that was on the great day of the feast. Many of the Jerusalem believers were brought out on Abner to meet Jesus at Bethany. During the sojourn at Jerusalem, the 12 learned how bitter the feeling was becoming toward their master. They departed from Jerusalem, all believing that a crisis was impending.
remember, let me go back again too. Remember that Abner was the chief of John the Baptist's apostles, and he was still in pretty good standing with most of the people in Jerusalem too, because they really believed that John the Baptist was a prophet. Bill.
You're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Bill.
Bill, you're muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
On Sunday, April 24th, Jesus and the apostles left Jerusalem for Bethsaida, going by way of the coast cities of Joppa, Caesarea, and Ptolemais. Thence, overland, they went by Ramah and Chorazin to Bethsaida, arriving on Friday, April 29th. Immediately on reaching home, Jesus dispatched Andrew to ask of the ruler of the synagogue permission to speak the next day, that being the Sabbath, at the afternoon service. And Jesus well knew that that would be the last time he would ever be permitted to speak in the Capernaum synagogue.
All right. And then next time we're going to talk about the crisis at Capernaum, right? And that's what they're preparing us for there.
Well, I do see that on the feeding of the 5,000, that really could be the message for today, because he went way out of his way to show man that, wanting material things is not going to get you into the kingdom.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
At this point, we are dealing with the only sign this generation will see is a sign of Jonah, which is a warning. People, you need to quit worrying about these physical needs and start looking at your spiritual growth.
Yeah. That's well stated, Steve. It really is. All right, let's have a little prayer and we'll close for the night. Here, would you like to pray tonight, please?
Father, Mother God, as we come to the close of this evening, we're just so grateful that we've had this opportunity to gather together and to learn your scripture from the Urantia Book and to correlate it into our minds and hearts, and the wisdom that comes from the insight with discussing it and reading out loud. Just thank you for this individual and personal growth and group growth that we experience as we study together on a regular basis. We just give thanks for this opportunity, this day, this understanding, and the love and the wisdom that comes through your revelation. It is in your name, Jesus Christ, Michael and Nebadon, we pray and give thanks. Amen.
Amen. And thank you for joining us at home. Please come see us again. Too bad to get through.